kissing the dust. The horse's hooves pounded hard against the ground, making me feel like we were flying as I rode to the best of my ability. The friction of the wind caused my wavy brown hair to slip out from under my wide-brimmed hat and obscure my view. The sand kicked up by both my horse and others got into my eyes, so keeping them closed seemed like the safest option. When I was little, my father used to tell me, "Trinity, riding with your eyes closed is very dangerous." Needless to say, I didn't agree with him at all. It was true that I couldn't see what was around me while riding that way, but that didn't stop me from feeling it. Above all, it deepened my connection with the horse. In this way, I had the ability to feel and interpret the feelings of the beast more clearly, allowing me to know when to push and when to let my mare rest. With my eyes closed, it was also easier for me to tell how far apart my competitors were in the race. That day was different. Those who rode the closest distance from me were allies, more specifically, my sisters Mary and Siobhan. The two of them rode just behind me, and together, we led the long race that would secure homes for us and many others in the promising lands of the West. This race was part of the most dangerous adventure my sisters and I had ever faced. We had been traveling for several days and riding for hours. This took a toll on my muscles and my spirit. I couldn't help wondering when we would finally reach the finish line, but we were not alone. The only way to get our parents to let us undertake that journey had been by allowing 3 brothers and 12 cousins to come along. It was a consolation for both us and them, especially since they were giant men and quite fearsome. There was no doubt that they would help us hold our land once we conquered it. I opened my eyes for a moment to assess the situation. Through the cloud of dust, I saw Sean McGregor, a prig, conceited, with a big head and a thick beard. As dangerous as he was insufferable. Both his family and ours knew that each other's clan was the biggest competition. The problem was not whether we could both get land. The cause of our confrontation was one of the best parcels that could be accessed. It was a space in the very center of the available land that my sisters and I intended to convert into a saloon. As I rode like the wind, I remembered the night we had experienced a few days prior. Before starting the race, we had built a big fire around which we sat with our cousins to eat dinner, play the violin, and drink whiskey. We were having a great time when Sean McGregor and his gang appeared out of the dark. They were scruffy men who could intimidate even my giant cousins.
"If it's none other than the McGregor clan,"
Sean said, drinking whiskey from a bottle, spitting into the fire, and then staring at me.
"We're glad they brought girls to entertain us."
"Mind your own business, McGregor."
My cousin Paul's giant frame stood up, blocking the exchange of glances I had with my enemy. "Leave it, Paul. Everyone knows that he doesn't need women anyway," I said sarcastically, and all my cousins laughed.
"This is the time for you to laugh, Trinity McGregor, but when it's your turn to bite the dust, you won't be so smiling."
Sean sneered, and my relatives let out an exclamation of mock fear.
"But don't worry, you are always welcome to work in my saloon."
The strong gallop of a horse next to me, which was not my sister's, brought me back to reality. To my displeasure, I discovered that it was none other than McGregor, who was about to gain the upper hand. He was looking at me with wild eyes, sending goosebumps rising on my skin under my red-checked shirt and jodhpurs. I couldn't let that damn pig take over the land that rightfully belonged to me.
"You are going to bite the dust, McGregor,"
he yelled at me when he was near enough. Ignoring my opponent, I focused on the terrain that loomed hot and desolate in front of me. I spurred my horse hard. I had to get rid of Sean McGregor and his cronies by any means possible if I wanted to get the best plots. I couldn't think of any way to lose track of them until I saw a ray of hope in the form of a tree on the horizon. I quickened my ride, ignoring the sand that kept getting into my eyes. As I advanced, a small forest of dying trees formed before me. That rundown oasis gave me an idea to lose McGregor. It was a bit risky for both my horse and me, but I wasn't about to let that bully get to me. Making use of all my skills as an Amazon, I continued to advance in a straight line instead of going around the small forest. Luck was with me as I managed to overcome the obstacle presented by the nearly dead trunks. I listened with pleasure to McCroc's shout, which told me he hadn't been so fortunate. The race began to take a toll on me. It had been a long and arid journey. The elements of nature, along with human impact, had made the trip almost unbearable. My chest ached from physical exertion, my horse hissed under me from thirst, and I too had a dry mouth and chapped lips from lack of water. I couldn't help wondering when this torture would finally end, and in that moment the answer materialized before my eyes. The group of men on horseback that I saw in front of me could only mean that I was about to reach the destination. That instant was crucial. Before the race began, we meticulously studied the map of the awarded plots and memorized the exact paths to our desired ones. I dashed past the judges, who would try to keep the peace and ensure that the land divisions were respected. They whistled and applauded as I arrived with my cousins, sisters, and hundreds of others. Some of my relatives opened up and headed for the lands they wanted. My sisters and a couple of cousins followed me toward the center of the grounds, while groups of people were scattered here and there around us. The target was getting closer. I could almost touch it with my hands. I just had to make a little more effort. Nerves, which I had been able to control throughout the race, suddenly surfaced. A knot formed in my stomach, and my hands, gripping the reins tightly, began to sweat. The same thing always happened to me when I saw the finish line. I couldn't wait. I felt my body getting out of control, and as if I was flying on the horse. And that day, I did it literally. I could already see the flag that I had to seize to proclaim myself the owner of that land. I increased my riding pace so much that the horse reared just at the edge of the field, throwing me through the air with such luck that I landed right next to the flag. I was still lying face down on the ground when I reached out and grabbed that precious pennant. From the ground, I could see the hooves of a horse, and looking up, I caught the eye of Sean McCroc, who was looking at me with disdain. Holding his gaze, I crouched down a little and kissed the dust. His face became a mask of even more intense contempt, and his eyes followed the movement behind me. My sisters had just arrived. They had jumped off their horses and were pointing their shotguns at McCroc, who had no choice but to walk away with his tail between his legs. Moments later, my other two cousins arrived, and the five of us hugged to celebrate the success of our race. It was amazing to think that we had made it. We were all disheveled, drenched in sweat and dirt, but we couldn't stop smiling. Standing there, I dared to dream for a moment of what our saloon would be like. I could see it in my mind, its wooden porch, with its horse trough, its swinging doors, its red-tiled roof, and, of course, its kissing the dust sign. My enemy had given me the power to go this far, so I owed him that tribute. And in the end, he hadn't kept his promise. Instead, it had been my decision to kiss the ground. That small gesture foreshadowed all the good that the future would bring us.